Thank you for coming. This is the plan. I'm going to go for maybe 40 to 50 minutes. And whatever I did 30 plus years, I will not able to cover that in 30, 40 minutes. That's given. But my motivation or my objective is to provoke you into thinking some of these things. Now, Srikanji mentioned that there was one speaker and everything that he said, there was evidence that he gave at the bottom. I'm not going to give you evidence every single time. Actually, I'll show you the pratyaksha, the objective proof right to your eyes in some cases. But be assured that everything that I say, there is a evidence to back it up. Evidence that will stand any scrutiny of science anywhere in the world, okay? The reason it's not put there is it clouds the slide. In fact, I try to follow as much as possible the rule of 10, 20, 30. You know, don't use any font less than 30, and I break that rule, okay? But just not to put too much on it. So two big aspects I'm going to talk, and then along that associated, I'll talk about some other key events of Indian civilization. But first is Mahabharata, and in that context, the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata. Okay, so those are the two big aspects, Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata. So let's begin. It's here, and then somebody is going to make it follow there. So someone gets bored of listening to me, and then you decide to go out of this room. That's perfectly fine. Just don't forget these 3 points. Okay. The first one, I want to assert, and I want to show some evidence of it today, is that the Mahabharata war, a physical, historical event that happened in the year 5561 BCE. That is more than 7,500 years. So remember that number if you leave early. Okay, more than 7,500 years. And a specific year, not 2 years before, not 2 years after. Now, going back, say, 15 years, I may not have able to say this thing. But with every day, it gets firmer and firmer. So my first book established that. Now, this is a date that one other researcher, many of you may know this name, Dr. P.V. Vartak, some of you who know that. He came up with that date back in 1970s, so more than like 50 years ago. So of course, some of you may wonder at this point, so what did you do? Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit. And the second point is that I exhausted literally myself and even the Mahabharata text looking for every single astronomy evidence that I can find. Okay, and still some skips through my attention. So therefore I write this word like a 300 plus. In 2011, my number was 215 plus. Then I started rereading Mahabharata, and then more evidence shows up. And you just wonder, how did I miss it first time? And I'm sure I have still missed more. That's more than 300 plus. So all that evidence, 300 plus, it leads you to that particular date, 5561 BCE and no other. Okay. And then once you go beyond astronomy, that's mostly astronomy. Once you go beyond astronomy, there is a lot of evidence from beyond astronomy. So what is that? Hydrology, geology, geophysics, listen carefully, okay? Oceanography, climatology, even genetics. Okay, that points to 5561 BCE. Okay. All right. And the last one, few insights from Bhagavad Gita. Now this is a tricky subject. Everyone thinks they are expert on Bhagavad Gita. So no matter what you say, if it doesn't agree with what they have heard, okay, then it's like, oh, no, I don't agree with you. So listen with the open mind. It's perfectly okay to disagree, perfectly okay to throw it away, but it might show you some other insight. Okay, all right. This is the scientific method. Okay, so logic of scientific discovery. How many of you have heard the name Sir Karl Popper? Okay, all right. So what does Sir Karl Popper talks about? How does science work? It is a triangulation of explanation, prediction, and testing, that triangle in between, in the context of a theory at the top, and in the context of a background knowledge. Okay? You want me to repeat? Explanation, prediction, testing in the context of a theory, in the context of a background knowledge. That is Sir Karl Popper in last century. If you go to sage Patanjali, to Yoga Sutra, What does he say? Pratyaksha anumana upamana pratyaksha anumana agama pramanani. That is nothing but that triangle. If you go to Sage Gautama of Nyaya Sutra, he just gives a more fine tuning and it gets better. He says Pratyaksha Anumana Upamana Shabda Pramanani. Okay? So essentially saying the exactly same thing. Brilliant minds, multiple places, separated by time and space, think alike. So I'm going to bring this slide at the end. Okay? So when you ask a question, and especially if it's a provocative question, and I want you to ask those questions, I'm going to ask you, where do you see the problem? Is it the theory? Is it the evidence? Is it the method that I'm using? Is it the inference that I'm drawing? Or is it the background knowledge that you're questioning? So suppose, for example, I use a modern astronomy data. If you question that, okay, I mean, it's your right, but I'm assuming that that data is correct. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. So this is the framework for our discussion today. Let's begin with astronomy. Now you will hear this from many other researchers or common people. Many of us are seduced with this whole idea of archaeology. And archaeology in a very limited sense, meaning you dig something, you find something, you date something. Now that's been very useful, but it's also extremely limited. Because when you dig something and you find something and you can date it, all that it tells you that there was somebody who used that pot or pan or whatever it was more than likely at that time. It doesn't tell you anything in the terms of context, like who was that person, why he or she might have used it. Okay? Astronomy, there are many disciplines and we should use anything that we can. But astronomy, you will find, is the only discipline, especially in the Indian context, Indian ancient narrative context, like Mahabharata, Ramayana, epics, many other grantha that we have, is the way of getting you the exact date. Now it can be wrong, but it is capable of giving you exact date, as opposed to saying 3000 BC, 5000 BC, 10,000 BC, something like that. So what is the first step? So I began with Mahabharata, and how big is Mahabharata? 125,000 verses. Okay, it's a lot of fun to read those. You can start with any translation. I would encourage you to read with some translation. Again, as I said, I cannot cover everything. My goal is to encourage you to go to the original. So I started with these 125,000 verses, 18 parvas. And the first thing that's called scientific acumen or Vijnana Buddhi. One of the things is, once you decide what is the prayojan is as to when the Mahabharata war happened, suppose that is the question we are trying to answer. The first thing is, and you decide to use, say, astronomy evidence, first thing you have to extract all the astronomy evidence and put it together. Make sense? Not selective evidence, you know. More than likely that some of that evidence will support your cause, some of the evidence will go against your cause, and that's perfectly fine, but you cannot be selective. So when I extracted that, that's what that number came out to. The 215, as I said, in 2011, and now the number stands around 300 plus, you know, by the time I wrote my second book. Now many people wonder, exactly how does it show up? Like just like a NASA data, you know, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory data, you know, it has those numbers. How does the astronomy data in Mahabharata look like? How many of you had that question before? The astronomy data, I mean, how does the data or the evidence looks like? It looks like this. And you say, ah, that's easy. How many of you can see, how many of you can read, by the way, the Nagari script? Just raise your hand. Okay. Okay, just spend like, you know, while I'm talking, but you see if you can see the astronomy evidence in it. In this particular small cutout there are 4 astronomy evidence, 4 pieces of astronomy evidence. Okay, at the top, if you look, after that number 22, Alaksha Prabhaya Hina Purnimasi Cha Kartikim Chandrodbud Agni Varnascha Padma Varna Navastale. Okay, what it is saying is, the recent Kartik full moon that passed, okay, it appeared that maybe there was an eclipse. There is no 100% certainty there, okay, because the moon looked like not as bright as the moon of full moon, okay. Something happened around that Kartik full moon. Then if you come down to let's see, this third line from the bottom, that number 30. This is that famous verse that I spent 15 years fighting with, trying to figure out why Vyasa, the author of Mahabharata, said that. After just 30, Ya Chaisha Visuta Rajas Trailokya Sadhu Sammata Arundhati Tayapesha Vasishta Prushtata Kruta. Okay, my dear friend, my dear king, this is the time, and the Vasishta, Arundhati, famous in all three words, is now walking ahead of Vasishta, or has placed her husband Vasishta behind. Okay. Next one, that's after that 31. Rohini Pidayannesho Stito Rajashanashchara Vyavutta Lakshma Somasya Bhavishyati Mahatayam. It's saying the Saturn, that Shanashchara, is doing something to Rohini. We'll not get into the detail. Torturing Rohini, one of the nakshatra, one of the star out of 27. And then the mark on the surface of the moon appears to have disappeared or not very clear. So that's how the references come to you. Okay, what do we do with it? And I'm going to walk you in a detail through one of that reference that Arundhati Vasishta did. Okay. All right. So we have those 300 references. Now we can classify them. That is another principle of scientific acumen. Okay. Like think of like a long-term, short-term, getting an approximate answer first, then getting to the very clear, clean, specific, precise answer. How many of you have used something called vernier caliper or micrometer before, right? So first we get approximate number, measurement, and then we look at the secondary scale, the finer scale, and we get a precise number, right? 37.2382 plus minus. So for classification, we can take all this data and split it into two categories. That's how it worked out for solving this problem. There can be many other ways of classification. So I put this into two different colors. Think of everything in the blue is where you get the approximate number. It tells you that this particular event definitely did not happen any time before this. It definitely did not happen any time after this. Everyone follows? That's what those things in the blue, that evidence in the blue does it. Once you get this approximate date, like finding the location of Microsoft Building 30, so we know approximately it's somewhere in this area, Redmond, whatnot, right? But finally, how do you fine tune? Take that turn and come down and park in a parking lot, so to say. So this other evidence allows you to get it precise and accurate. There are other principles of, again, I'm saying this because you can relate to this, and all of these are there in the India's Shad Darshanas, the 6 philosophies. Philosophy is a sort of loose word, but Sankhya, Yoga, Vaisheshika, okay, Mimamsa, Vedanta. It's there. It's there in a different forms, Everyone has a slightly different focus. 3 important things is sequence. When you are cooking, does the sequence matters? Absolutely, right? In what do you do first, what do you do second, what do you do third? So that's the sequence. Then the association. Some things you mix it together, and then you do the next step. Okay? And then also unification. At some point, you need to able to bring it all together. Okay? So we start with that AV observation. I'm just giving you the answer, and then I'll walk you through that one observation. So Arundhati Vasishta observation, that one single observation, Ya Chaisha Vishnuta Rajas Trailokya Sadhu Sammata Arundhati Tayapesha Vasishta Prushtata Kruta. That one line gives you this time limits. It says if that observation that is given in the Mahabharata text is true, you have to make that assumption, whatever is given there. Then based on astronomy evidence, so the agama, the background knowledge is all over modern astronomy, even ancient astronomy. What is the theory? The theory says all the evidence, all the astronomy evidence of the Mahabharata text is basically the factual, actual, visual descriptions of the sky of the Mahabharata times. It's a very generic, universal statement. Okay? It tells you that Mahabharata war, based on that one observation, definitely did not happen any time before 11,091 BCE. It also tells you that it did not happen any time after 4,508 BCE. Okay? Now, if you take another set of data, again it's all astronomy. So looked at, say, Bhishma Nirvana references. Everyone is familiar. I mean, how many of you are familiar with Bhishma or Bhishma character in the Mahabharata? Okay, who is not? Okay, all right. So during the war, Bhishma fell down on the 10th day of the war. And then remember the wish that he has in a specific power. He's lying on the bed of arrows until the day of winter